This is Audio Gyan, and I am your host, Kedar Nimkar. Welcome to a deep dive into the minds of luminaries from the Indian creative world. In the age of 10-minute delivery, our today's guest is working for 10 years or maybe more time to deliver. We have Kshitiz Anand with us on Audio Gyan. He wears many hats. On professional front, he works at Paytm as Associate Vice President Design. He's an investor and founder of Suchak, an edtech startup. He also co-founded Kare Keba Ventures, along with few others to invest in startup ecosystem in Bihar. He also has a cohort-based course on system thinking for product builders. On a personal front, he's an educator and has been teaching in multiple colleges and schools. But over and above, today we are here to discuss a case study with him, which made me very curious about Happy Horizons. Kshitiz is a chairman of board of Happy Horizons Trust. It engages in design thinking, participatory learning, community-based learning, and alternative education interventions to improve the quality of school education in India. Currently, 40 people organization works with 75 schools in rural Bihar, outreaching an approximately 35,000 students. Without further introduction, let's welcome Kshitiz. Kshitiz, welcome to Audio Gyan. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Kedar. Thank you for this opportunity. Really excited to be here.
Awesome. So yeah, as I mentioned, I've put all the show notes, as in all the links in the show notes for people to deep dive. And this sort of Audio Gyan is more of a case study where I wanted to deep dive into Happy Horizon Trust. क्या बनाते हो, तुम्हारे कुछ frameworks है, ready program, एक on the fly भी सोचा था, which we'll come to, which is about intrusive learning versus, yeah, we'll get there. But it's mainly to document Happy Horizon Trust. So I wanted to ask, by starting at a very meta level, since you have seen design working at multiple scale, multiple regions, multiple user cohorts, like what's your definition of design and how has it changed over time, especially after Happy Horizon Trust and other initiatives?
Surely. Yeah. So that's a very weighted question. Of course, over the past 20 years of being in the design industry, it's almost like that's one question that keeps evolving, with passing by years, right? And it's like, what is design or what is a designer? There are multiple ways to look at it. And I do feel that over the years, that has evolved considerably, right? From, starting your job as a UI designer to then, starting to build teams, to understand, how do you really understand the notions of working together with other teams, building organizations from scratch in the for-profit sector, setting up a design school, teaching people, teaching students. So kind of wide range of things. And I think at the end of the day, where my understanding of design really kind of stops at, or kind of pinpoints to, is this notion of adding value, right? And adding value when it comes to problem solving, adding value to the stakeholders that you end up interacting with and serving. So for me, design is a lot about service, and the fact that you are always with your design, you're serving people, because it's always about the people at the end of the day, right? So they need to be pleased with what you're offering. That offering could be anything, right? It could be a product design, it could be a simple thing like a poster. I remember doing a work for a politician as well. So you kind of delivered design in different formats. But at the end of the day, design to me is something that solves a problem and really adds value to the different stakeholders. And that I think, over the years, as I slowly start to explore newer areas of application of design, right from the nonprofit to the investment space to setting up more and more organizations, I feel much more, kind of passionate about that particular aspect of design, the ability to add value and solve a problem.
But has it, so it typically, I have this classic quote which I keep referring to, which is, in the beginning everything looks the same, and then you are in sort of like the discovery mode, and in the end you again land up which is similar to the starting one, but it's a different perception altogether. So while dealing with Happy Horizon Trust or the hospital that you're building, has these changed at a tactical level? And then when you zoom out, it's problem solving. But when you zoomed in state, has it solved, or any nuances there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, it does change you, right? Like with every engagement that you end up doing, you are a different person altogether, right? And I do feel that, over the years of working in the Happy Horizons ecosystem, and you mentioned hospital, hopefully we'll get time to talk about that as well. But when you look at the entire, every time you do an intervention, every time you interact with somebody, there are certain aspects of design which you kind of work at the very granular level, right? So it's all about, for example, design being about pixel perfect design, or design being all about making sure that designs are good, aesthetically good as well. So while problem solving is good, but those principles of design that you keep learning along the way gets applied every time and again, right? So the context keeps changing, but the principles remain the same, and the foundational principles gets applied. So if I design, let's say, a poster for communicating with a mass in rural India, there's no reason why it should not be a good, very well designed poster, right? So there's no reason why it should not be, right? Or let's example, take the hospital or any project that we're taking. So I do feel the aspects of design that you end up learning along the way, through the different projects that you end up doing at the very microscopic level when you earn these things. And then when you're working at a very macroscopic level, which is that, society change, that large scale problems, wicked problems that we talked about, those principles still come in handy there as well, right? So you then build an entire team around that, which basically then starts to believe in the same philosophies of design and then work together with you.
Interesting. Cool. So yeah, the topic of the day, like what is Happy Horizons, and also if you can add why like you thought of building as a trust.
Surely. Yeah. So Happy Horizons, interestingly, is it's a non-profit organization that we started 10 years ago, 2012 itself, and 30th March is actually our 10th anniversary of it being.
Wow, it's going on. Wow, what a coincidence! It's going live on 30th March.
Yeah. So basically,
awesome.
That's the day of our foundation day. And what's very interesting is when I moved back from the US after doing my master's, my master's thesis topic was around the notion of design for social impact, right? And it's kind of very interesting because you are in a school which is pioneer in interaction design and user experience design, and you end up choosing a topic which is very different, very unlike what any of the professors had ever heard before, right? Design for social impact, and being so kind of assured about the fact that you want to use what you learned in actually applying into problem solving in India, right? Or in thing. So in fact, my grad project or grad school project was one of the inspirations for me to come back to India immediately after master's. And then, we were toying in this idea of how do you set it up, right? Like how you really, I believe fundamentally that I wanted to do something. So we set up Happy Horizons Trust as a non-profit organization because there were two reasons behind it. One was, being able to just, dedicate some time of my, from my busy schedule to really solve problems or work in problems, which really I felt was critically in need of problem, like good designers to solve for, right? So it was essential to make sure that we ended up, creating an initiative. Then the question again, of course, whether it's a non-profit or a for-profit setup that you are setting up, right? We set up Happy Horizons Trust as a non-profit because we fundamentally believe that there would be probably some aspects like a private limited company, like Happy Horizons Consulting Private Limited or something, which can focus on the for-profit venture part of things. But then, if you truly want to create impact at the society level, you need to remove that earning money aspect from the very picture, right? So we kind of set it up as a trust because we said, let not the intent of doing good or let get marred by the understanding of earning money as well from it, right? So different people have different ways of looking at it. For us, it was we wanted to be very clear about the fact that when we work in the space in education and with government schools and with the communities, we literally do not want to have anywhere, right? Like since the past 10 years, we have been kind of following that to have the notion of earning money from it. So that way, we were kind of very sure about the fact it was set up as a non-profit organization. Obviously, there are some operational challenges with it, but that's for a different story altogether. But the fact that we wanted to set it up and the name is kind of very interesting. Interestingly, Happy is Anand and Horizons is Kshitiz, right? So my name actually is what it is, but the story behind it is, I actually, when Flickr was a thing, I had my Flickr handle called Happy Horizons, right? And that stuck around with me because I used that to become when I was doing a lot of photography, when I was, traveling around the country, doing presentations, doing workshops on photography. And that was kind of way in which I was able to connect to the society as well. Right? So it kind of was an extension from there to say that, I had already been connecting with society and with people using that name. And then when we wanted to set up the nonprofit, we said, let's just call it Happy Horizons Trust and just build on from there. So yeah, it's been like 10 years in the journey, but and we're just like, as we say, we're just kind of starting to go even better now. So
there's so many threads that are connecting here because I started with 10-minute delivery and 10 years was just like playing on the same words, and I was not aware that it will finish 10 years. Great, yeah, congratulations on that. Yeah, so and you said social impact. What made you think that we should start from rural India?
Yeah, I mean, like, see, there is always, as I always feel that there are always these choices that we have, right? Like, we can always decide where you want to work or where you want to channelize your energies towards, right? So, um, like, even when you wanted to set up a non-profit and work in non-profit, even though we registered in South, like Karnataka, I was in Bangalore at that point in time, but we knew that within the country also there are certain pockets which really needs our attention or which needs our interventions, right?
How did you find out them? How did you find them?
So one, of course, you do your research in terms of finding out stuff. One, of course, because I'm from Bihar originally, so that helped in because you're already familiar growing up the problems of society that exist on the society level, the challenges that exist out there, the possibilities of intervention, right? And I'm saying intervention purely from a social impact perspective, as well as obviously there is the business opportunities that exist. But for us, it was a lot about trying to do something where we know that there is a demand for it or there's a need for it rather, right? Because people would not know what they need, right? So if you can at least understand what people need and then be able to create something around that, right? So for us, it was being able to we explored a lot of things, right? So we explored the notions of healthcare. This is back in 2012 itself, right? We explored the notions of healthcare. We understood social structures. Bihar was going through a very interesting political transition between the Lalu era and the Nitish Kumar era, and the roads were being built. Literally, like, villages were having electricity for the first time, right? And we were like kind of trying to say what can be done. And after a lot of so-called research, we spent a lot of time in the field. So I would come back from the US. I was doing running my own first startup, my own studio. So I had time in the world. I literally used to just travel, as a bachelor as well. I had just got married. So we were still very, we didn't have kids and all. So we were just traveling literally around village to village, communities to communities, towns to towns, and trying to understand what area should we start our intervention in. And what we really boiled down to was this notion that, at the end of the day, it all boils down to the lack of education, right? The fact that there is no good exposure or education at that grassroots level, which kind of doesn't even, convince somebody to think about the things that we talk about on a day-to-day life. Right? So that's where we said, let's start with education first. And then again, we drill down a little bit deeper into saying that, okay, because the education itself, you look at a very wide, broad spectrum, right? Like from, the early childhood education to, post-college to upskilling to continuing education it's a very wide spectrum, right? And we said, you might want to think about creating impact in the society. But then if your foundations of the people itself are kind of not very strong, right? Like whatever you build on top of that is going to be very shaky. Right? So we said, let's try to focus on strengthening primary school education, because that's where if the foundations can be strong, right? The children who come to schools, if you can start from there, then the chances are that their foundations are better and they'll be able to learn better and they'll get better exposure and stuff. And then even within that, we started to, and this is again taking all the references from how we do in design, right? Like go deep into the problem and try to understand, you ask the why, and you really go to the root cause of the problem. And then when we said primary school education, we said, okay, why is it that children are, because primary school education is an age where children should really have fun in education, right? But if you go to probably 90% of schools in India today, that's actually the contrary, right? Children in that age actually don't have fun in school, right? Which they should actually be having fun. So we said, why is it that children don't have fun? It's because, children are never engaged in that way to have fun, right? Because the teachers are not equipped, and obviously that's a different problem altogether at a very systemic level. So we said, okay, what would it take for us to, engage with children in primary schools? And we said, around the world, universally, children love stories. So let's just start telling stories to children. Right? And that was a basic foundation with which we started. Go to school, engage with the principal and the school management, ask them for permission to tell stories to children, right? And literally, we would just start telling stories to children. And we realized that, just by telling stories to children, the engagement level became so high. The children would literally come back to school. So attendance level went high and things like that, because children were so excited to hear a story in the schools. Right? And those kind of interventions we started. And eventually, we then said, okay, it cannot be just me running around school after school. And we set up a different program, the DEDI program, which I'll talk about in just a while, to say that, okay, can we extend this to more people in the society who can do this? So the whole systemic thing that eventually happened. So, but yeah, I think, for us, what's really essential is to be able to say, how we started and then how we are right now. Obviously, it's been a long journey in the making, and hopefully we'll get to cover more of those things as we speak along as well.
Yeah, it's awesome. And if you can also highlight some bit of the real India, which is far away from this
Oh,
10-minute delivery startups, because I don't want to classify Happy Horizon as another startup because it has got something more to it.
right.
So can you, like, just to set context, because who are these people you are dealing with,
Yeah.
and what are their aspirations, and when the why was unfolding, when you landed up, like, was there a, yeah, in a cliche term, product market fit or not? And what were these stories also? Were they
Yeah.
because just yesterday I happened to listen to one, like, a slow interview by Nilesh Mishra.
Uh-huh.
उन्होंने उनके बेटी को स्कूल से निकाल दिया, like he said, like, don't go to that school, it's I think one of the best schools in Lucknow, because she's 6 years and she drew giraffe in multiple colors, and the teacher sent a letter saying, boss, please mind your child,
Got
वो गलत जा रही है. And he got pissed off. बोले यार ये क्या चल रहा है? Like, so yeah, I can see a lot of layers there. You want to talk about, like, what is this real India, or
Yeah,
like which
surely.
which you're dealing with at least?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I have been fortunate to is to spend a lot of time in rural India. In fact, I don't know if that's the real India per se, because we have India is a mixture of multiple countries, and there's so many layers to it, right? But the kind of areas that we work with, right? Just to give you a simple example, right? I'll give some numbers, right? That'll probably set things in context better, right? So the female literacy rate in that region is about less than 50%, right? Like about this is like at least in the towns. And if you go to smaller, like the communities, the villages that we work, that's about like 30%. Right? Like the national average is about 70%. So you can imagine that, right?
Hmm.
Per capita income wise, when you look at, let's say, national average being about a lakh and a half rupees to 1,70,000 rupees. Delhi is about 3,25,000 rupees. Bihar as a state is about 50,000 rupees to 60,000 rupees per capita income. That's like about 60,000 rupees people earn in a year. And the communities where we work with, that's about 25,000 rupees. So about like 2,000 rupees to 2,500 rupees people earn in a month. That's the, like the, on a economic spectrum that you can place the kind of thing, right? The communities where we work is flooded by the rivers of the Kosi River, the waters of the river, the Kosi River, right? So it's like almost every year there is summer vacations for about 2 months in May and June. July, the school starts. August, the school starts. September is washed out by floods. October is washed out by festivals. November you have classes. December and January is too cold to have classes, right? February you have classes. March is exams, right? And then there is break. So it's like literally for the whole year, schools have like literally like 4 to 5 months of education, and the rest of the time it's like for something or the other. And then the schools that remain open, majority of them are single teacher schools. And those teachers also then have to go and do duties for some election or the other. कभी पंचायत election है, कभी ये सर्वेक्षण है, कभी वो सर्वेक्षण है, कभी something or the other, right? So many times what happens is the schools exist because government, when the first time Nitish government came in, and when there was the right to education was being implemented, building schools was not a problem. A lot of schools were built, the physical infrastructure was built. And then you had the right to education, which also said that you should give midday meals to children. So children started coming to schools. And you'll be surprised to know that when we did this very interesting survey with almost like 100, 200 children, saying that why do you come to school? The majority answer was we come to school for the food, not for the teaching or not for the learning, right? And that's the India we work with, right? Where suddenly you realize that is it what we're dealing with? Is it an education problem or is it a hunger problem, right? Are we trying to solve for food hunger because people are hungry, right? And then when a child has a choice to whether go to attend a school or go and help his parents in some sort of a work, he would choose the latter because for them food comes better than at a higher priority than basically a thing, right? Education. So all these complexities of the layers of society that we work, I think it's important to obviously you cannot categorize or kind of say that these are specific things, but you have to understand the complexities of the system in its totality, right? It's not that you can just segregate one and say, okay, I'm going to solve for this, right? And that's something that we have also realized, that the more time you spend, the more layers of this complex society that you actually uncover, right? And then it also, I feel that it makes you very humble as a designer, which is what I have constantly been really it has impacted me as a person, right? So for me, I'm like, okay, हाँ ठीक है यार, जब AC नहीं चल रहा है तो कौन सी बड़ी बात है, पंखा तो चल रहा है, पंखा नहीं चल तो कोई बात नहीं, छाया तो है ना, छाया नहीं तो कोई बात नहीं, पेड़ तो है. It's like, so you kind of it starts to impact you, the kind of things that you start believing in and things like that. also from a perspective of, it's just that I do feel that, I often advise a lot of people to, whenever you get a chance, you should just go and at least visit them. You don't have to work there. You just go and visit them, because it's just about, exposing yourself to the fact that there exists this India that we are talking about. And we have to do something about it, right? It's not that we cannot do anything. We just be in our zoned out, AC rooms. So I think for me, it has been that humbling experience of being able to work with that, being very conscious about that, be very mindful about the existence of its existence. And then obviously the work that you do otherwise is kind of, there. But then that kind of keeps you, motivated also from time to time.
Wow, it's very moving, yeah, very moving. Because one interview with Gitanjali Kulkarni, she's an actor, but she also engages in education in the rural parts of Maharashtra. And she said कि ये जो PM की योजना है, not to glorify the PM, but yeah, जो योजना है from the government of 1 meal a day, I think that has moved the needle in terms of people coming to schools at least. Yeah. These Adivasi children have never seen like a blank A4 size paper in their life. And imagine you giving a crayon with it.
Yeah.
They just it just makes them fly. Yeah. Beautiful. Let's take a short break here. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to the show. Yeah, so coming to Happy Horizons, can you share a few details about like what are these small initiatives or sub-initiatives within Happy Horizons, like Project Jagriti hai, Jigyasa hai, and also if you can talk about the Ready program, right? क्या है ये Rethinking Education and Development of Youth program. तो ये क्या programs है ये, like how do they work, how are they mobilized, what you are doing currently in them, like just architecting. You talked about fellowship also, so उसके बारे में थोड़ा बता के.
Yeah, so I think, again, it started with a very simple thing, right? Like saying that Project Jagriti was, we just want to, awaken the children by telling them stories, right? So Jagriti was more about that. And it started very simply by saying that, we want to engage with children in primary school, and we want to make sure that we engage with them through stories. So it was all about, their awakening, just making them aware about the fact that, somebody from outside will come and tell them about this world, that I remember in one of my early days of storytelling, I used to ask them about, like, ask me any questions, like random questions. Someone asked me, ki Amitabh Bachchan se mile ho kya? And they'll ask me, like, rocket kya hota hai? And so the kind of curiosity that kids have, right? So we thought, can we create an avenue for, kids to have these kind of conversations? Storytelling being the initial intervention that we started with. And then obviously we said, this is at the primary school level, right? So Project Jagriti was a lot about the awakening at that primary school level in children using storytelling. And then that got extended a little bit towards, not just storytelling, but then a little bit of activity-based learning as well, right? And then we had, initially it was me and my wife, Vatsala, who were basically, doing the storytelling in schools. And my staff members, and in the organization, we just had one person, Vinay, who's been with us for almost like 10 years now. He's also literally grown with us. And we said, boss, this is not scalable, right? Because we cannot do this ourselves everywhere. Like the schools will grow, the number of schools will grow. So we cannot, start this, right? We cannot do this ourselves. So we started a youth development program called the Youth Leadership Development Program. Because we said, if all it requires to engage children is to tell them stories and, engage in some fun activities on, painting and drawing and crafts and all the things that we do as designers, right? Just have fun with prototyping and all these things, leveraging paper material, local level materials, clay, Play-Doh, all these things. If we can train this youth in the society who themselves are hungry for some kind of intervention to help them also grow, right? So we started the program, the Youth Leadership Development Program, which is a fellowship model for high school girls. And interestingly, we have a very strict 6-stage process for the selection to this fellowship, right? Which is kind of very crazy because, typically you think, theek hai, kar lete hain, let's just get people, right? But then, we started with basic thing, right? And you won't believe, but the very basic thing that we started assessing them was ability to read. Like these are like high school students. The majority of them cannot even read a single paragraph of text, right? It's also because many of them have gone through that same education system, right? They've just passed the education system and gone to a stage completely clueless, right? So we started with simple things like reading. So reading assessment was stage 1. Writing assessment is stage 2. Give them a topic to write. Then we make them do a group discussion on a certain topic. Then we give them an extempore topic to basically do public speaking. Then we do their personal interviews, and then we do their family interview, which is very interesting. How many parents keep interview लेते हैं. And these are all girls who have probably never stepped out of their homes after grade 8, because grade 8 के बाद ऐसा होता है कि you stay at home, you don't like go to school, बस exam देने आप school जाते हो, right? And so these parents really get shocked when we tell them कि नहीं, इनको जो है, they have to go to primary schools and tell stories to children. They're like, but why? And what we did was we built this entire fellowship program around the 21st century skills for youth, right? Which is basically, skills on communication development, creative development, critical thinking, collaborative things, leadership, right? So we said, here's this set of youth whom we have in the society who needs to be developed because they are the future of this country, right? Imagine if you have these. I mean, the reason why we have so many upskilling programs in the country is because our country is full of youths who don't have that kind of skill base, right? So we started a program for them. And as a part of which we said, one of your key things that you will get your trainings and you'll get your stipends and scholarships and everything. But what you will need to do every week on week is to go back to the primary school, which is in your vicinity of your house, and basically tell stories to children, right? So हमने क्या किया कि इनका एक for the youth fellows we developed a fellowship program. So we designed a fellowship program which kind of started to map their development skills over a period of 2 to 3 years. So within a period of 2 to 3 years, how does a fellow develop? Just like saying like how we do employee development program, हमारे team members का development करते हैं, growth metrics होता है. Similarly, we design the growth metrics for these youth girls. Things like public speaking, presenting yourself, going and doing meeting with like a completely unknown community, going to a different town to go and engage with the community whom you have never been there before, and things like that. So their development का हमने एक matrix बनाया, like what we evaluate. And for the children, we said, because we want to emphasize more on their holistic development at the primary school, to strengthen foundational years of learning, we said we are going to focus 5 levels of, we're going to look at 5 areas of development for children. Like one is your cognitive level of development, language skills development, motor skills development, interpersonal social skills, and eventually your critical thinking as well, right? So 5 areas of development which we looked at, and we started to build this together. So this was basically the Ready project, right? So rethinking education and development of youth together, right? So we're leveraging the potential of the youth towards making foundation years of learning. We call it the Ready project. It's like we are making the youth ready for the future, and we are making the children ready for the future in the education as well. So just so that they don't drop out, because again, dropout is a huge problem, right? Class 5 में बच्चे आते हैं, drop out होते हैं, class 8 में drop out होते हैं, class 10 में drop out होते हैं, class 12 में drop out होते हैं. So if you look at, let's say 100 child enters the school in at 6 years of age, only 30 of them actually finish grade 10, right? So 70% of them drop out. So and those are real challenges that we face, right? So again, even if you're able to say that in this school, out of 50 children, 40 of them were able to maintain attendance and come regularly, you do feel that that's a huge win for you, right? So yeah, those are kind of basic programs. Then we had this very interesting understanding that we started to leverage a lot more of activity-based learning into our programs, right? So because we do believe that the schools are there, the teachers are there to give you the syllabus-related learning, and for the children to have fun. If I go and teach the syllabus again, they're going to just kind of get like nahi karna hai, right? So their interest and motivation will not be there. So very consciously by design, we made sure that these girls get trained on sessions like origami, sessions like doodling, sketching, leveraging colors, rangoli making. Every festival is celebrated, kite making. So all these activities driven thing, and children just love it, right? And very recently, so this year we're just finishing off. Some of our fellows are basically graduating, right? 24th April, we have our graduation day. It's our annual day as well. And few of them were just sharing stories saying that how children get so emotional because they're like, now who's going to come and do these sessions with us, because, you will be going from the school. So I do feel that, again, when you start to look at that systemic level, you understand that there are so many areas of intervention, right? Like the areas of intervention with the girl. So there's that, layer of empowering that girl. There's that layer of, she having to fight with her family to allow her to go and attend a meeting. She feeling very financially independent because she gets a stipend of 2,500 rupees, which is more than a family income sometimes, right? And it's like, for her to feel that I can actually be something, be able to buy her own phone, do her own mobile recharge. Hugely, empowering feelings, right? And then she being able to, after graduation, we've had a lot of our girls go and, join schools as teachers, join other non-profit organizations as, employees and stuff. That's where you feel that, you are also setting them up, making them ready for the entire thing, right? For the entire life ahead of them. So yeah, multiple interventions. Also, one other intervention which we did very interestingly was to also start to engage with teachers, because at the end of the day, fellows are great, but then the existing teachers also needs to be empowered. So we started this program for teachers training and leadership development, which has been also gaining traction now that the schools have reopened after COVID. Hopefully that will get more traction as well. So yeah, the goal is to engage with like all the different stakeholders in the system across different intervention points and basically design programs specifically for each of them. And when you have that larger 30,000 feet view, system thinking view, you know how they're all interconnected, right? Like how one feeds into the other, how the other feeds into the other. So that's something which is consciously, which is my part, is like that's the part that I'm really involved with, just making sure that these connections are maintained. The fact that, there are these independent teams that drive these programs on the ground, but I'm always at that level. And of course, I can go back to that level if I need to, the microscopic level. But consciously so keeping that, because you understand the larger system also in its complexity.
Correct. Very, very. I'm short of words, yaar. Like seriously, बहुत ज़्यादा मेहनत किया life में. You stress a lot about activity-based learning also.
Yeah.
So and can you highlight when you said that 100 में से सिर्फ 30 ही pass out हो रहे हैं? And I was reading one of your articles also about entity theorists versus incremental theorists. तो उसके बारे में थोड़ा बताओ ना कि like what is happening and then what sort of intervention through design or the systemic thinking that you're weaving and then improving as we go along, as opposed to the traditional school of learning. उसके बारे में कुछ?
Yeah. So if you look at, like this is one of my, ideas that I've been working for quite some time. I do believe that when you think about education per se, right? Education has been compartmentalized into syllabus, right? If you look at the like at least
so I mean वो तो एक clear है क्योंकि वो ना like it was industrial revolution में like obedient चाहिए थे लोग, तो वो
so since then it was there, right? So it was designed accordingly, and obviously it's a open book, everybody understands that, right? So we said there should be some way where the learning should be a lifelong process, right? And learning can be a lifelong process if your curiosity towards learning is always there, right? And curiosity towards learning is always there when you do something which you enjoy doing and you learn out along the way. So the learning is an outcome of that enjoyment of the activity, right? So it's not that you learn to have fun. You have fun and then you learn, right? So that's the basic fundamental difference, right? So what we did was we started to think about the notions of play as a very integral part of our activities. And we said, when we want to have fun, children should feel that this is natural to them, because obviously children learn best naturally, right? So for them, like play is a very natural way of learning. And then when you think about the fact that learning is something which is a lifelong process, which should not stop just because the syllabus has got over, right? You should be able to take the notions of what you learned in the class, apply it to your real world, and take the learning from the real world and question in the class, and then eventually that whole system evolves, right? Otherwise, what's happening is for sure, like I think all of us know that it's all about there's this so-called syllabus, there's an exam, it evaluates you for what you have learned. And eventually what happens is people are all, going after the rote learning. So rote learning, because I have a strong interest in, cognitive development of children, right? I have 2 children as well. So I keep experimenting a lot of these things within my own children as well, right? But I do believe that, when you learn anything by rote learning, you're basically feeding into your short-term memory, right? You're basically, and short-term memory has a finite capacity. So you really don't, the moment your exams get over, you fill it with something else. So the previous what you had learned basically goes out of it, right? So the short-term memory gets fed in by your rote learning. Whereas when you do experiential learning, you're basically feeding into the long-term memory. Long-term memory is very deeply connected with your subconscious mind, right? So when you feed anything into the subconscious mind, right, or the long-term memory, that stays with you for a much, much longer period of time, right? So when you break down a learning from a rote learning perspective to a experience perspective, what you're basically doing is that experience is being distributed across long-term memory, across different parts of your brain, so that you remember it at a very faint mention of something. You remember it because suddenly your entire long-term memory will throw up that memory, and you're basically able to recall all of those things. Right? So
sorry to interrupt here, but यार मैं ना थोड़ा वो अलग स्कूल से भी आता हूँ, गुरु शिष्य स्टाइल में एक रट्टा मारने को भी like it gets into your muscle memory also, right? You have any like this sounds very contradictory in nature, right? you build that muscle memory. So for example, and then you only evolve those sort of really important trigger points like meditation, or physique, fitness, core development, those sort of things, and then rest of the things you can learn at will. वो भी एक अलग school है. ये थोड़ा सा like तुमको दिखता है contradiction?
So I don't see a contradiction. So there are some things which will obviously will be dependent on rote learning. I'm not saying that you are dependent on entirely everything on purely experiential learning. So there will be certain things which you will learn initially, but the goal is when you don't apply that learning into something, it just fades out, right? So let's say for example, if I ask you a lot of people, like if you ask me, हमने जेई के समय में बहुत सारी चीज पढ़ाई की, right? Like physics की पढ़ाई की, बहुत सारी चीज की. अभी कोई मेरे से पूछे कि what are the 10 ways of you can apply electromagnetism in your life, right? Like I would be clueless, right? Because I learned it at that time, I excelled at it, I cracked my JEE exams, and I forgot about it, right? But if someone said me it's something which you can pick up in life and you can actually apply it in these different ways, and here's a way of you can experiment and try out things, probably I would have remembered it for a long period of time and being more confident about it, even let's say X years down the line, right? So I do believe that yes, initial syllabus and rote learning is essential. I'm not saying it's kind of completely to do away with it, but then the emphasis has to become more towards the application of knowledge and the application of learning, which is where experiential learning really helps, because you're able to apply that knowledge and then you're able to remember it for a longer period of time. So you don't have to pay an extra effort to remembering. So even if let's take the the Guru Shishya way of learning, right? It was always about practical learning a lot more, right? Because they emphasized on this fact that you learn something in theory, but then you practically do it, because then it has gone to your long-term memory, right? Which it stays with you for a longer period of time. So that's the way we started building the notions of whatever kind of interventions we will have in the schools with the children, with these youth as well, and eventually making them more experiential driven. So activities play a huge role in that, right? So if you're able to build things around that, in fact, the Suchek as a platform that we've been thinking is that it's an experiential learning platform, right? We are saying that can we extend this now to more students, levels tech, non-tech, as well as service design, to kind of build this entire, experiential learning platform for children. So yeah.
Got it. It's very मतलब बस इसके ऊपर तो हम like घंटों बात कर सकते हैं. Yeah. So just to sort of come to the ending part of it, I have 3 more questions, but since we have like limited time, I thought I'll मतलब offline बहुत सारी बात करेंगे इसके ऊपर. Yeah. So any big challenges that you faced or still facing? Is it sort of the government support or the teachers? Maybe it would be just infrastructure, like बिजली नहीं थी starting में. Yeah. You mentioned about parents not sending their children after 8th standard or maybe 8 years के बाद. So like what are maybe word तो ठीक है, history हो गई. आपने काफी कुछ ground cover कर लिया. But अभी क्या challenges हैं?
So yeah, I think it's the challenges, I keep saying that, with every solution comes a new problem, right? तो पहले होता था कि एक्सेस नहीं है लोगों के पास, तो चलो मोबाइल फोन दे दो. बट जब लड़कियां हमारे जो फेलोज हैं, when they started using mobile phones a lot, parents are like, mobile is a problem, so we'll not give the mobile phones, right? So पहले वो हमने solution, there was a solution, but then that solution became a problem, and now you have to think of a new problem, right? So this is something which I've realized that when you work at a systemic level, right, the whole notion of wicked problems, you have to be very mindful of the fact that your solution that you build will never be, as it is after X amount of time. It will always result in new problems. And if you can basically prepare yourself as a designer, as a problem solver for that, and constantly think and design interventions around that, right? So that is something which has been my biggest learning experience of working in this, in this manner for the past 10 years. I also feel that, the challenges, keep changing over a period of time, right? So back in the days, obviously, there were not so many government policies available, government schemes available. Today, there are a lot more out there, right? Today, there is one of the problems that we face is there is a lot of information available, but then, credible information not available, right? So how do you really make sure that your stakeholders get credible information about you, about your work, and what they should be doing? Also, the fact that, in fact, the biggest problem has always been the lack of well-trained resources, right? So a lot of my energies goes into actually training local resources, because that's the only resource who will stay back for long, right? The local resources, because you cannot expect that somebody from a Delhi or a Mumbai, well-trained, well-qualified person will come and work out there, right? So the only best bet that you have is to train the local people in the hope that they stick around, because that's their home base, right? They'll stick around for a long period of time and be with you. We've had like a good share of people who have been in that bracket. But, getting access to quality people, human resources who are, because, what work that can be done, let's say 5 hours, sometimes requires, 20 hours to get done, right? So you have to really, in the mindset, you have to bring this shift, right? So the hustle culture often sometimes doesn't work there, because you are like, I give somebody a task and the expectation is that, okay, in my corporate world, probably this will get done in 2 hours. But then after 2 days or 3 days, also that work is not progressed, right? So that kind of makes you really, in a way, it also makes you very patient, because you develop a lot of patience, right? Because you're literally like, that things will take time. But yeah, access to resources in terms of human resources, obviously financial resources always remains a constraint, because Bihar as a state doesn't get much of CSR budgets, like donations and CSR budgets. So operational challenge is always there, which is where we have kind of started to explore setting up the hospital, and I'll talk about that if we have time. We'll probably talk about that briefly as well, right?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, but the whole idea is that we want to get trained people, and what we did, I don't know, I think by now you must have already guessed, is 10 years ago when we started our fellowship program, we started to invest in the youth, in this youth leadership development programs. And today, when we are building the hospital, when we have the plans to build a college, when we plan to build a paramedical college and a school, all these youth that we have trained eventually get employment in our system. Right? So that way, we've already started doing that, rolling out offers to people to join the hospital that we are setting up. Somebody goes into the pharmacy store, someone goes at the reception, someone goes at the nursing, because all these are people whom you have then yourselves trained, right? And what we envisioned then, saying that in the future, probably we will have avenues where we can absorb them, because they will need jobs, you will need people. So it's a win-win for everybody, right? So you kind of addressing that need. So yeah, we started working on.
Sorry. Like, it's so amazing and it feels so organic. It sometimes feels planned, but it's not. And you discover as each passing day. Yeah. But in the end, it just feels like classic finish.
So around in 2020 June, right? I had gone to Bihar to set the foundations for a school that we were planning to build at that point in time. But then, this is the time when the first wave of COVID had just kind of subsided. And in fact, we had just got over the first lockdown, and I was visiting Bihar, and I said, let's, in that entire town, in the vicinity of that town, which serves almost like 5 to 6 lakh people, there's not a single ICU bedded hospital, right? And we said, boss, like, again, fast deliveries, same day delivery, 30 minutes delivery. Here you have this place where what if something happens and people don't even access to a simple, like a well-bedded, well-established hospital. So 2020 June, we started construction. Hopefully in like May, we'll have our inauguration. So in about like less than 2 years time, we're going to set that up and that's going to go live. We started with a simple vision that we want to make sure that there is an avenue where people can get good healthcare. For the staff part, we have our fellows who have graduated from programs, give them offers, get them into the system. And healthcare obviously is another area that we have been also diversified apart from our school work that we're doing. So yeah, I mean, it's like, as you said, it over the time it keeps evolving. The system keeps progressing bigger and bigger. But yeah, I think it's a challenge remains. Obviously, access to funds will remain a challenge. Access to right people will remain a challenge. But then yeah, I think something on the other end system, you kind of do the efforts and you try. Some things work, some things don't work out. But then you have to keep trying. Right? That's what we believe in.
Awesome. I think I'll put is there a donation link or something?
Yeah, we have it's on our website and all. We have the entire donation that people can end up doing.
Yes,
the bank account details and everything is there on website. So pretty much open about that. Yeah.
I'll put that in the show notes.
Surely.
Cool. So then, how do you manage to sort of? Well, I wanted to add actually on the systemic thinking part of it. I was listening to another podcast where they say that the systemic thinking is like, if I have to, and help me understand if the same thinking, right?
Yeah.
In a house, in a building, you have a water tank, which is on top. To fill that up, you have one in the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
To pump up, you need a pump. So you keep that pump. But if that pump fails, you need a backup pump. And what if the electricity goes? So you need a diesel generator. So these sort of layering or cascading sort of systems are systems of systems, which are traditionally and heavily used in, I think, nuclear plants and other places. Yeah. So this is how you design a plant. Still, you never know, like a tsunami or an earthquake might just, like recently Japan had another incident.
Yeah.
So any sort of learnings you had while building these systems in the education space through design?
Absolutely. So, it's kind of very interesting that you brought this up, because I, being a systems thinking practitioner, I kind of at every point in time, I'm always thinking about whether it's my work at Paytm also, or even at my work at Happy Horizons, that we're doing. Like, for example, right, the fact that, when you understand and when you know that, the lack of human resources will be a problem eventually, right? So back in the days, we started, this thing about leadership development program. And then we also started to intervene with schools, right? So in the schools, we started to low touch, for example, intervention on teacher training program and doing some one-off workshops. So Project Jigyasa was basically a activity workshop that we do. Like, for example, we'll do book designing workshop. We get children to think about, doing like small activities around them and things like that. That's a Project Jigyasa, basically arousing the curiosity of children, right? And when we started intervening with schools, we started understood a lot of other aspects of the schools, right? So, for example, one of the problems that schools face. So in India, we have the well-to-do government schools. You have the government schools, which are run by the government. You have the private schools, which are good private schools, and then you have the elite private schools. The international schools, all the world school of science. But then you have this major, like a very bulk part of affordable private schools, right? Like they call the APS. Now, APS actually they are those schools where a parent who is not very convinced about a government school but cannot pay a high private school fees. Right? So they'll send their kids to a affordable private school with a monthly fees of about like 800 to 1200 to 1500 rupees monthly fees, right? Now, inside that affordable private schools, also there are schools who do only up to grade 8, like from nursery to grade 8, because after grade 8 requires you to get affiliation from CBSE or state board or some board. So schools happily run as business models from nursery to grade 8, right? And these schools can never afford a high-end B.Ed qualified teacher because their economics doesn't work out, right? So you understand the notion of economics and stuff like that. So a lot of our fellows, when they graduate, they start to intervene in these schools also, right? They start to engage with them. They become faculties out there. So they are obviously getting their economic empowerment, but at the same time, schools also get well-trained resources, right? Because eventually that fits in the system as well. And then that gives us more opportunities because now the schools, when they see these girls performing well, they invite us to do teacher training workshop for the other teachers, right? So then it becomes like a very nice way in which we start to charge them a little bit money, saying that, okay, it's going to cost us to do a training and it generates some revenue and things like that. So it's that, that entire relationship that you start to, form, right? And somewhere or the other, you have to keep finding, okay, as one of the key things in systems thinking is the notion of cause and effect, right? So when you do something, you have to understand this will result in certain kind of effect. Right? That there could be multiple effects that a certain cause results in. But if you're able to understand those effects and then being able to say that based on these effects, this could be a specific intervention that I could do in a specific context, right? So and then you design something around that. So that design could be it could be a workshop, it could be a booklet that you end up giving, it could be a edtech platform that you're building, it could be a fellowship program, it could be multiple things. Right? At the end of the day, I personally see this notion of design being applied everywhere.
Brilliant. Sir, एक last personal question पे मैं end करूँगा.
हाँ जी.
Your investments or your sort of engagement seem to be very different. It's be it Suchak, be it Happy Horizon Trust and other initiatives with the hospital. What does your designer within tell you to keep you motivated to do these projects, especially handling like a private job also?
Yeah, see, I think, for me, what has been mostly inspiring is two things, right? One is the fact that we are never short of problems to solve. There is there'll always be problems to solve as long as you're open to solving them, right? You can get fixated with the fact that, okay, I have this really narrow vision of the world and I'm happy doing that. Or you can get, influenced by the world around you. And as a designer, because you're a curious observer, you will start to observe problems and you might want to do something about it, right? That something could be different things, right? So for me, that's something.
But isn't it like, मतलब designer को focus भी चाहिए ना? तुम इतने problem देखोगे तो solve भी नहीं कर.
मैं आ रहा हूँ उस पे. Exactly. ये सवाल मेरे से almost every interaction, every meeting ये लोगों से पूछते हैं कि यार कैसे इतना सारा चीज को देखते हो, manage करते हो. So the answer is I don't. Right? Like I initially intervene with massive energy initially, set the teams up. Right? So one of the things I'm a big believer of is to set up teams and give them ownership, to drive and lead things. Right? So आप ट्रस्ट को देखो, so I am a chairperson of the board, so I actually intervene. मेरा काम रहता है mostly on the finance and the basic strategic level. Right? The operations में मैं बिल्कुल involved नहीं. The entire team in Bihar is handling the operation. Like they go from one city to the other. दरभंगा में start किया, सहरसा में काम कर रहे थे, पूर्णिया में काम कर रहे हैं. All of this is done by the team in Bihar. Right? So just having initially, I remember a few years ago, this is about like 6-7 years ago, intervened, to a very large extent initially, and then you're making sure that you have these interventions that your team can drive the things, right? So similarly, whether it's Suchak also, there's a team that is driving all of those things. I'm just an investor in Suchak right now. And then, like, for example, Curriculum Ventures also, right? It's a platform that we started to invest in startups in Bihar. Again, I'm just a co-founder, but then time to time I do some advisory talks with the startups that are a part of our portfolios. But then, the team really is driving all of those things. So I'm a big believer of the fact that you need to set up teams. You need to know when to delegate. You need to know whom you want to give ownership to the things. I definitely don't want to do all the work in the world myself. I'm a person who don't want all the credit for doing all the work in the world. I would rather put the entire team in front saying, boss, इन्होंने पूरा काम किया है, they deserve all the credit. By all means, do that, right? I am probably somebody who loves to see that there's a challenge and a problem, taking that first step of having initiated something around it, because many people don't do that also, right? So I'm like, let me take the first step. If we feel that we do an honest thing with it, I'm pretty sure we'll get people around that, right? So I started, let's say, Bihar Development Collective करके एक initiative start किया था, which is around, mobilizing all of the non-profits in Bihar, like credible non-profits in Bihar, people who studied IIMs and IITs and all those people. It's very credible non-profits, Acumen Fellow hai, Teach for India Fellows hai, Gandhi Fellows hai. So started initially put some energies into that. Now that it's kind of running on its own. I'm like, I'm going to focus my energies somewhere else. So being able to know as a designer, as you mentioned, that focus is very critical for me, right? Like I know specifically here, mirror time is going for what thing, where I'm investing my energies. These days, for example, a lot of energy is spent in parenting because I have 2 kids and I want to spend time with them. But the team is driving a lot of things which is there on the ground, right? And hopefully for the hospital also, that will be the similar story. I can already see it happening. The team being there, equipped to kind of manage things out there as well. But yeah.
Superb. सर एक philosophical प्रश्न पूछ ही लेता हूँ, आ रहा है बहुत ही. आपका patience का definition क्या है अभी? Like how do you see patience?
हाँ, patience is like, अगर हो गया तो अच्छा है, नहीं हुआ तो कुछ सीख लिया उस चीज से, right? So it's like that, right? So I think not giving too much of thought into something that didn't work out, because you know that you would have learned a lot from it, right? So if you have just put that emphasis on the learning part, any effort that you end up putting into anything will give some amount of learning. So वो एक frustration रहता है, but मुझे पता है कि वो learning will be handy for me at some point in time, right? So who knew that I'll end up here, right? Talking about all these things. But that effort was that we went there, we met in Ahmedabad, we spoke for a while, and just something happened and we are here, right? So I just feel that that whatever you do, it cannot be always black and white. Some things you do, you don't get an immediate result, and we have to just be patient around that, right? So take the learnings of it, and then obviously focus energies onto something else. That learning will come back handy somewhere or the other in the future. So,
yeah. And if I have to be a little poetic, we can end with like कबीर saying धीरे धीरे मना धीरे सब कुछ होए माली सींचे 100 घड़ा रुत आए तब फल होए. So yeah, I mean, definitely all the power to you, to Happy Horizons, and a lot of stuff looking forward to work out as you envision, as you plan, or as you unfold.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. This is great talking to you, Anand. It's been like real pleasure talking to you. And knowing the kind of stuff that you have done. Awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kedar. Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Yes. Happy Horizons turning 10 this year and releasing on. I think it's a brilliant coincidence. It's just for me. For me, it's also unfolding of the good stuff that I'm trying to do. Cool.
Thank you so much.
And that's it from today's Gyan session. For show notes and more Gyan, visit audiogyan.com. If you like this podcast, please don't forget to check our other interesting podcast on IVM Network. You can listen to us on IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. To stay tuned, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at IVM Podcast. And if you wish to connect with me, I am at AudioGyan Moments on Instagram. Until then, take care.